Good morning, everyone. I call this meeting of the Governance Committee to order. I'll start with roll call. Assistant Mayor Kelly. Here. Councilor Tabor.
Here.
Councilor Lombardi.
Here.
I'm Councilor Cook, and I am here, and we're joined by our legal counsel. And this morning, and yes, twofold. And we will start this morning with a review of our minutes from the September 23rd, 2024 meeting. Did everyone have a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. I'm the only one seconding. You can choose.
Yeah, who moved? Okay.
Are there any comments, concerns, questions? All in favor?
All right.
All right.
Okay, the minutes are approved. We are going to go back to changes on procurement policies. This is part of our review process of administrative ordinances we're still going through. And we have some final changes to the procurement procedures, disposition of real estate, and disposition of surplus property after the auditor's review. So I think it's really important that we had a request at our last meeting from a public comment that we have the auditor review these changes and make sure that this met the needs of the auditor. And the auditor came back with just some slight suggestions, which were added. But then also our legal department went through a review of disposition of real estate as well and determined that we should add an additional line there in that section as well in 1.503. So those changes were posted online, but I want to make sure that they're really clear to everyone. It's in section 1.500, item B. At the end of the line, that we added the comment, including the designation of a position responsible for the day-to-day implementation of the procurement process in accord with the charter.
Right here, folks.
Okay. And the next thing that was added was in section I. There's an and at the end of the sentence because there was an additional section
There?
J added. And J is, this is at the request of the auditor, just to make this really clear, to comply with state and federal procurement requirements, period. And then the additional language that you're going to see on disposition of real estate is in section 1.503. The next to the last paragraph in that section, the tax collector shall have no obligation to take by tax deed any property with environmental contamination or other liabilities that outweigh the value of taxes likely to be recovered. And here's the additional language, as well as for any reason contrary to the public interest and allowed by law. So making sure that we are allowed the full range of legal remedies to us accorded in state law. And so those are the changes that came back to us. Are there any questions or concerns about these additional changes or language? If not, I want to make sure that we have a final opportunity, again, for public comment on these changes before we move this forward to the council. So with your permission, can I get a motion to suspend the rules and move up public comment on the administrative ordinance review?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right. Then I'm going to go ahead and open public comment on these changes. Is there any public comment?
I guess I'll go. Peter Huda, 2A South Street. So since I didn't have the new blue in here, I can't make comments on that. I'm going to just go over comments from the other. Okay, so the first thing that I'd like to bring to your attention, and I don't understand why, is under section LI 500. My problem is the city manager shall develop and implement procurement policies. This is a finance function. And I went back and I looked at Laconia and I looked at Concord and everywhere else, and in our previous policy, This was a function by the purchasing manager, which is now called the purchasing coordinator. And the reason for that is because the city manager is a sign-off on any changes that are coming forward from the finance area and the purchasing area. So what you're doing here is taking away a separation of duty here, basically, that doesn't agree with your purchasing manual. And I'm referring to the purchasing manual that was sent to me and revised March 2022. So that would be my first question. The second place that this probably doesn't go through the city manager is Section 501 on definitions, second paragraph at the end, as adopted by the city manager. This should be the finance director. Okay. Next, the Section 502, competitive bidding process. I went back to the previous purchasing policy, and the amount on page on 502 with the goods and services less than $50,000. The amount previously was $10,000. Now, I don't have anything that was upped per the CPI since 2022, obviously, and I couldn't find the purchasing manual online. That was one comment. The other thing here is it's really vague on number E, technology acquisitions, where it's clearly described in your purchasing manual of how this will work. The problem here that I see is it's vague, and if you're looking to compare software packages or get something canned to do your accounting, generally this goes through the bidding process, and it's not just one vendor. I don't know that, but that would be something for you to look at. The next question I would have under the competitive business bidding process shall, the bid is awarded unless the city manager petitions the council. Now, according to RSA number 47.5, the only one that can accept a bid, and previously the only one that could accept a bid in Laconia and in Concord, is the purchasing manager. Again, you're not separating the duties of the purchasing department, which I guess you're changing to procurement now. The last thing is a biggie, disposition of real estate. Now, according to RSA 47.5, city property, the only ones who could dispose of property are the city councilors. And I could read that to you. I have it, but please refer to that. The other thing I'd like to bring to your attention here, and I don't know why this is in here, because it's interesting that you're changing it now. The sentence on the last page, in cases where the city owns a manufacturing home or where taxes are due to the property over in excess of $50,000. The city manager transferring this, and I'm not understanding why you're going over this. I do know that you had 3 properties, I think over in the Lincoln Richards Avenue area, that you did take by taxes. And I urge you to make sure you are in compliance with this U.S. Supreme Court case number 22166, because basically that tells you, and I found this information in the New Hampshire Municipal Association, you cannot take a property for more than the taxes, and this involves the deeds. I don't have any idea what's going on. I'm just saying please be careful here. There is a U.S. Supreme Court case that deals with this. The other thing I have a problem with, or I would note that you need to be careful on, nothing is in this section is intended to limit the city council's ability to grant interest through land or conveyance or swap property. This goes back to having a public hearing on anything that the city council is going to decide to do. So that one, to cover this in a policy, is kind of superseding both the purchasing manual, which clearly on purchasing manual number X, which is 10, disposal of city property, property valued less than 500 other than real estate, and you have number C, property valued at $500 or more and real estate. The sale of real estate, supplies, materials, and equipment valued at $500 or more must be approved by the city council before proceeding. So basically, I think you're looking at taking this sale from 500 to 50,000 here without city council approval. And so you're contradicting what's in your administrative code with what's in your purchasing manual. So you really need to look at that. The other thing is, if you go down on this, I know you guys don't have this, any such sale authorized by the city council may be conducted by competitive bid. You can, basically, the city council outlines what they could do. It could only be conducted by an auctioneer licensed by the state of New Hampshire, and the purchasing coordinator shall prepare the request for approval. So in a lot of the stuff that you're doing here, you're taking away the authority of the finance department through the purchasing department and the purchasing manager, because a lot of the other, and I could bring that up and read to you, but both Laconia and Concord specifically say this is the purchasing manager that handles most of this, because the sign-off goes from the department head who's requesting it to the purchasing manager to the city manager. They are the final authority. If you take away the purchasing and the finance authority, you're taking away one of the checks and balances, basically. So please think about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Sue Polidura, Middle Street. And I was just made aware that you were looking into the purchasing procedures and systems, and I have a lot of experience with that because I did it both in corporate and also the federal government. And so just looking at the general information right now, because I'm trying to get acquainted with that, what Pete Rehuda just said is it's very accurate when it comes to the redundancy that the system has to have in order to be able to pass the requirements of knowing who's doing what and who is signing up for what. The system, I understand that you're going to be getting a new system for purchasing. That system is designed, most systems are designed to make a 4-lane highway into a 2-lane highway. Very narrow, very distinctive kind of operation on who does what and what automatically goes to the next step. Okay? So I don't know what system you have decided or whether this is in progress or not, but the people that are users need to have a say on what system it is, because they're the ones that are going to use it. And what Peter just said regarding that you have, it looks to me like you have an awful lot of responsibility to fire signatures being the city manager. And the city manager is like one of the approving entities. So there is, you have to create you had to create positions in between that and others. So you can have this redundancy that people will say, yes, this is what's happening, instead of as a sole responsible person for the whole thing. You can't have that and being able to track expenses and who authorized what. I used to work I worked for Data General and also for Timberland. And I can tell you right now that the CEO of Timberland didn't have the approval to sign off on anything when it came to purchasing. He told someone, probably his secretary or somebody in the department, to create a requisition. That requisition went to accounting. Accounting put the account numbers, and so that who needed to see it. Then it went to the purchasing manager. The purchasing manager gave it to a buyer to place the order. And so there would be a line of signatures in there, even though, nobody's going to say no to the CEO, but you have to have the trail, because these documents are going to get audited. And when they get audited, you need to have a trail that says this is not on one sole person's authority that it was purchased, because that's when you get into trouble. One of the situations that I got in, and I won't say the place, but somebody that was placing purchase orders, the system was very loose. So that person developed a relationship with a vendor and actually wrote purchase orders to that vendor and then tracked them back into the company as though they were received. And there was never items received from that person in between the buyer and this other entity from the outside that would divide the profit until there was an audit and they were caught. Recently, there was an issue over in Seabrook. 4 or 5 people that were charged for misusing their purchasing card, which is very usual, not the misuse, but the use of purchasing cards to be able to place purchase orders. That's how the newest systems are. And the only way that they could attract them is by doing the required checks and balances. When I worked for the government, that happened monthly. I had to come up with a report that was written off, and I had to go through every purchase order that I placed, and they needed to balance the final report to the penny. And that's how they knew that I was using the funds from the government in a specific situation and with integrity. So when that is missing, that redundancy is missing, one person has the authority to have a $50,000 or $25,000 balance on your credit card to place orders with. You can use it, and if you're the same person that signs off on whether that item was received, the services were received, it's easy for you to go ahead and pay for a vacation. So what I'm saying is that a lot of what I'm seeing in what I just read is that there's an awful lot of authority just given to the city manager. You need to break down that authority to include a purchasing manager or a finance manager, a requisitioner, because you got to be able to pass an audit. That's how the best way of passing an audit is to create in different layers of approval. So no one person can just go ahead and buy whatever they want without somebody else checking to make sure that that is an A, authorized item, B, that it has the funding and is being charged to the right department, and that the necessary people are involved in the process. So anyways, just looking at this, I know the process is going to continue. I'm just trying to get familiarized with this. But anyways, thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Chair.
Question?
Just for a point of clarification, because I know that there are new members of the public here getting kind of caught up on when it comes to, and I know Deputy City Manager Suzanne Woodland is not here right now, but it's my understanding that within the new procurement software, there is internal checks and balances that department heads and procurement will need to sign off, and then it reaches the city manager's desk. Is that correct within my understanding?
Yes, I mean,
Okay.
the process has always included that.
Yes.
But now it will be done via the computer, a computer program versus paper.
Manual. Yep.
Manual. And Nathan is here, who could also speak to the new system, but I would also say that there have been a lot of internal meetings with staff prior to deciding on the new system. Everybody's very enthusiastic in that it accomplishes all of our goals. Also, I would just say that what's designed here with this policy is for the city manager to sign off on a policy and a process, and to designate a single person as indicated, mandated by our charter, to be responsible. It's consistent with all of the city manager's responsibilities under our charter, in terms of the staff and designating who's responsible for what duties. But she's not going to be the person she's not going to designate herself as the single individual to be responsible, if that's the concern.
Yes, I think it's also important to clarify that we did add language.
Yeah.
That's part of the new language that was added under 1500B, that to clarify here that there is a designation of a position responsible for day-to-day implementation of procurement process in accord with the charter. So we added that language because of the last public comment section. So just to make sure that that was really clear, even though that's what our manual says we are doing anyway. So I'm going to ask our finance director to share any insights.
I would make a couple of comments. Thank you very much. Nathan Lunny from the finance office. The purchasing manual is empowered by the ordinance, and it will be next. It'll be next up to be revised and to be amended to follow the direction taken in the ordinance. I would tell you that there are actually two applications that we seek to implement. The first one deals with procurement. It's literally called the procurement module, and it will it will manage the bidding RFP, RFQ process. We know that we have some procedures to change and wanted to empower ourselves in the process to do it right. Things like eventually this online resource, which will be more transparent to the public and to the vendors, allowing them to opt in and get updates on a regular basis from the software, will allow for electronic submission of responses. Right now, our policy manual really speaks to in purchasing very much paper, the blue ink date stamp, et cetera, very public open bid opening in the conference room. The software will allow us to do that without folks having to come in. There will be Zooms or Teams or other open meeting opportunities for them to see the bids open. The results will be available online, et cetera. So with those changes coming with procurement, we wanted to make sure that we had laid the groundwork in our ordinance to support that. The purchasing manual will follow. We're also exploring right now new ERP software for our accounting and payroll and human resource systems. That also will take what has become or has stayed a very paper-driven manual process and automate that. And I expect that there will be changes that we'll want to reflect in the purchasing manual that will support how the software will allow us to function, the efficiencies that we find we're very much looking forward to. So I guess that's all I would say. This was certainly, and I guess I would concur and echo, I don't expect, although the city manager does sign every contract, I don't expect that the city manager will be involved with approving every requisition or purchase order that we flow through the system. So But I do respect that the city manager is the chief executive, is the person responsible for ensuring that there is a system in place, so.
Thank you. Sorry, another comment if I, based on kind of public comment and what I've researched on other communities, under section 5014, disposition of surplus property, I understand that letter A says property valued at less than $1,000 other than real estate, but could there potentially be, I'm looking at Northfield right now, they have at their bottom of their ordinance, exception, real property shall be disposed in a manner consistent with state statute. Maybe that is a better clarifying statement, in addition to, or at the end. I understand that it says other than real estate, but I think it's worth maybe double clarifying at the end of this ordinance that anything to do with real property, i.e. land, shall be disposed of in a manner consistent with state statute, so that there's just that double point of clarification there.
I'm writing down your comment.
Thank you. And I just want to make a note that in comparing this with, I had Hopkinton, Nashua, Nottingham, Newmarket. I found the consistency of saying city manager or town administrator was pretty consistent in those 4 or 5 towns that I read that their procurement policy. So within that, and knowing the double checks, the balance, the checks and balances that will be in this visible system, in this online system, I'm comfortable. If the committee's comfortable adding kind of just that extra language to clarify again that we're following state statute for anything other, for anything that's real property, I feel comfortable as is moving this forward.
Yes, Councilor Taylor.
Yeah, I feel comfortable too. The public comment raises an important point about the one-over-one authorization from department head to purchasing manager, or procurement manager to city manager. I think by adding this language, saying it's the duty of the city manager to create a person responsible, designation of a position responsible for the day-to-day implementation, that gives us the purchasing manager function and the one-over-one approval up to the city manager. I assume that's the way we've envisioned it.
Yes.
And I don't think there's an option to not create that position.
No, not the way this charter is worded.
Right.
So it was anticipated. My understanding is in the prior version that was anticipated, but we've made it explicit with this language, so it's clear.
Are there any other questions from the committee?
I agree with that. I think that the city manager is the overall executive and has responsibility of defining that position and enabling it.
I wanted to address, I think one of the other concerns expressed was around competitive bidding and the figure of 50,000, and that seems to be a huge increase from 10,000. But I think it's my understanding from prior meetings that that number has been going up every single year based upon changes.
CPI.
It's almost 20,900 right now.
Okay. So we're increasing it fairly, it seems like significantly, to 50,000. But are we finding that we've had an increased number of things that we're having to bid out that we didn't before because we haven't kept up with cost of living changes? Now at the 20,900 stage? I know that you haven't been in that role.
Right.
So
I think that's the general concern, is that, because goods and services, the expense is increasing exponentially, that not everything needs to go through the process. Things that never went through the process before are now coming in. I'll let Nathan comment on that, but I think that was the idea.
I think, I'm not looking at it, but the question was asked 2 meetings ago, and I think the response was that there had been 4 or 5 bidded
Yeah.
bidded items or bidded projects in that range from the bid limit we have currently to 50,000 over 2 or 3 years. I mean, it was the purchasing coordinator pulled that data and shared it. So I think one of the things that we're finding is, and I could say that in my short tenure so far, there's a lot of man hours right now involved in putting that process together, and there's maybe far less return in this gap that we're addressing with this change. I think it's worth saying out loud, this does not suggest, or is not intended to suggest, that we wouldn't be aggressively shopping every purchase. And I think I used my example that the sleeve to go on the Chromebook for the school is only $25. Let's get them. And I said, well, if you could do the $25 sleeve for $23, it sounds like it's only a $2 difference, but you're buying 500 of them. That's $1,000. That's far below the $20,900 bid limit now, but it still is important that we're shopping, proving out the market, and being prudent with resources. So I don't expect that would be any different with anything that might land in this range.
Thank you. I think that was a really critical explanation that we received several meetings ago, that everything is competitive. It's not that we're not getting bids. We're just not going through the formal bidding process for things under 50,000. It would be a calling around and getting pricing for items process. But that's consistent with our manual.
Right, and we surfaced that in our discussion 2 times ago, that anything below the 50,000 still gets 3 competitive bids by the procurement process. And the competitive bid process is cumbersome. I mean, and a lot of firms decline to bid because it's slow, it ties up their resources. So I think this has been well thought out, the limit.
And the final thing that I wanted to make sure that is clear is that this does not change our audit process. There were concerns expressed about individuals potentially purchasing things outside of the process using a credit card, but all of that is captured in our audit process on an annual basis. So I think and this does not change that process.
No.
Okay.
Madam Chair, since you did not close public comment, may I respond? Quick.
Come on.
Okay, so in response to some of the things that were said there, I will like to share the sale of city property. On the purchasing side, thank you for clarifying, Nathan. It's interesting that you're kind of going backwards, where you're not following the purchasing manual and going into your electronic systems. You're going to fix that later, because everything was laid out for you in here, and that's where I'm getting the finance director has to do with the finance process. That's just one comment I'd like to make. And then I'd just like to share with you on the keeping excess profit from sale of deeded property violates the takings clause of the Fifth Amendment, and a 10% assessed imposed on RSA 8090. This is from the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and it gives a clear outline of what happened there. The other thing that I'd like to, what my concern is specifically is this disposition of surplus property at 50,000 going to the city manager. And this is definitely covered in RSA 47.5 city property, and city councilors are the only ones who have the authority to do that. I think that's about it, but Laconia has the same thing, that the city manager may at any time, with respect to a tract of parcel or real estate that the city owns or has acquired, make a written certification to the city council that the city has no present or reasonably foreseeable process claiming its surplus. Following this determination, the city council will hold a public hearing in accordance with Section 183(6)(b)(1). So just hopefully that helps and clarifies it, and we need to respond.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to close public comment on this issue. And the last thing that we should address is Assistant Mayor Kelly's request under Section 1504, which I think is going to provide the clarifying language that that's being requested at public comment too. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I get this right, you would start Section 1504 before A with a phrase, "Any real property shall be dispensed in accordance with state statute." And then it would be defined as it is A, B, and C. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Is there any legal concern around?
Do you feel
that
it's better at
language?
the end, or?
I was just processing those options, but somehow I think you need to change the language of A, because
A.
that says other than real estate, so.
Do you feel that we need to change, would you feel that we would need to change that language if we just put the clarifying statement at the end? Should it say real?
Adding a Section D?
Or you could say, the disposition of surplus property, and then have a section that says, A, any real property shall be disposed of consistent with state law, and then your current A would be B, and you could say other property valued at less than.
Okay.
It might be clearer.
I'll come up with 5 other ways.
Ways of
to
yeah.
do that in a minute, but that's my first thought.
Okay.
Just so it's clear that every other section is talking strictly about non-real estate.
Okay. Does everyone understand that change?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be A, and the language would be any
Any real property
real property shall be disposed of
consistent with state law?
consistent with state law. Consistent with, I'm changing my language here. With state law, and then
Other-
everything,
Other property,
B would be other property valued at less than.
I just think it's a clarifying that a lot of times people look at property and they think land.
yes.
And so I think we need to, define. It's like when you're buying a home and you say like, hey, if it's piped in, it stays. If it plugs in, it can go. You mean real property versus property.
That's fair. So, and the other would just be on the new Section B, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I just wanted, for the minute taker here, just to be clear. So Section 1.504 would have the new A as just discussed, and then B would be for other property, and then would the A, B, and C below be 1, 2, and 3? Because you're talking about
Yeah.
other real property?
That would be clearer.
Yep.
Great.
Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
We're consolidating to an A and a B.
So, Madam Chair, we provisionally approved this at the last meeting, pending any changes from the auditor. We departed far enough now that we need to revote, do you think?
Yes, we will need to revote. I want a formal motion to make this change as well.
I would make that motion as clarified by Attorney Farini.
Is there a second? Is there any more discussion of this particular change? Okay. Attorney Farini, do you have anything? Okay.
Not for this change, no.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that change has been made.
Who moved and seconded?
I moved, Council Lombardi seconded.
Thank you.
Yes. And now, we're going to go back and I'll ask for a motion to approve the procurement procedures, or I should say procurement procedures, competitive bidding process, disposition of real estate, and disposition of surplus property as amended today with the changes that came in.
So moved.
Second?
Okay. Is there any further discussion of all of these changes, the additional changes, or any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. It is approved. So that will go forward to the council with those changes.
Clarifying question on that. Because of the process that this committee has undertaken for this version, is it the committee's desire that this should go forward as a request for first reading or for first reading? The reason I ask is the deputy city manager asked me to ask that question, and I understand we're trying to get the procurement system up and running as quickly as we can, and we need this to dovetail with that. So I just asked for clarification from the committee whether this would go on the next agenda as a request for first reading or for first reading.
What is the preference of the committee? It has been discussed here, and it's clear that we have been discussing it, and we've had public comment. So in the past, we've gone both ways.
I'm comfortable moving forward for first reading. And then if there's any, if the council has, if any other councilors have any concern, it can be kicked back, changed, and I don't foresee any major changes that would cause for a delay of second or third.
And there'll be public comment on the second reading, so I have no problem with that.
Yeah, if that's within our ability to do as an advisory body. I mean, I would just,
I think just your intention would be helpful.
Okay, yes, exactly. We can make the request that we schedule first reading at our next council meeting, if that's the will of the committee, and then ultimately the mayor will determine when he sets the agenda, if that
There we
is.
So it
Reasonable.
is your recommendation that this go on as first reading, but it is the mayor's discretion that will ultimately decide. Okay.
Right.
So, thank you. The next item on our agenda is voluntary training review. We're going back to the volunteer training. There has been a lot of work done at the staff level on the manual, the volunteer training manual. So we're going to look at that again. I realize today there are a few things that we'll have to go back to, but this is, of course, not something we're planning to finalize today. This is continuing this discussion. So we will start by looking at the training manual and changes that have been made to that. So I'm going to turn it over to Attorney Farini, who has been leading that process.
Thank you. So I have up on the screen for you folks, and you have, on your iPads, the revision that was just made of the handbook. The goal, and I think at first you reviewed the copies of the ordinances and the copies of these policies, which were also attached in the packet. But the goal was to reference them here, and this particular handbook would be in the Power DMS system that we have for sign-off, as would all those policies that would apply. So that's sort of the 30,000-foot view. What was added is in red. So on the top of page 5, my understanding of the will of this committee is that these would not be optional trainings and orientations, that they would be required of our volunteers. So that language was added to substantiate that information. It will repeat itself in another document, but that was added. The other change is on the bottom of page 5, which just gives a specific reference to our ordinance relative to appointment and tenure. Again, these will also be part of our trainings as well, but it was probably best to make the specific reference, and that is in fact a link that they'll be able to click on. And then moving along, the reordering begins at the top of page 8, and it just references policies that the city has and one created policy in this document. So we do have a standard of conduct and code of ethics policy, and this describes that exists, and that you would be required as a volunteer to acknowledge and sign off on that particular policy. And as you know, that's the broad one that has confidentiality and a lot of the behaviors that I think we're trying to instruct our wonderful volunteers on how to understand what's expected of them in the confines of their service to the board. And then in addition, there is also the reference to our or ordinances, which you have reviewed as a part of this originally and is linked there as well. The non-discrimination and anti-harassment policy, again, that's one that exists in the city, and that would be a required sign-off for our volunteers as well. The acceptable use policy for electronic media, again, to the extent it complies. I don't think a lot of our volunteers have city phones or city equipment, but in the event that they do, that policy was slightly amended, the language there. Again, another separate sign-off. And then we did address this social media policy, and we wanted, a lot of that is going to be addressed in the actual training. You know, what is required or what is expected. But we thought we would create a statement relative to, we don't provide social media platforms for our volunteers. So if you're on a platform, it's your personal platform. To be careful about our policies when one is posting on those platforms, requesting, you know, that professionalism and respectful behavior be always in everybody's mind when they're posting. And we want to instruct our volunteers of the perceived or actual conflict of interest if we're opining on things that may or may not come before our board or that we'll be involved in. This is a very general statement that could certainly be edited, but we thought mention of this and probably best addressed through the actual volunteer training with examples and discussions of that. But that was that particular edit. The one thing that we did not address in this, and that is open and it's highlighted as the very second to last page, is violations of city policies. And so we have volunteers serving at the, you know, appointment of the mayor, and that appointment is supported by the council. So that is a process that is in place. However, we also have a very robust ethics violation procedure set forth in our statute. And so the thought for the committee to think about and discuss is, do we want to bake in a more formal process for violations of policies similar to the structure that's set forth in our ordinance for the ethics? And so that is something for this board to review and discuss.
This is kind of an important question because we have, the ethics ordinance really applies to elected officials and to members of land use boards, but does not apply at the same level to individuals who are appointed to, say, a blue ribbon committee, or individuals who are appointed just to a role on a committee that does not necessarily have a role with regard to state statute, implementing state statute. So the question is what happens if they don't follow the manual? And currently, there's not a formal process for that. The mayor can send a letter of warning. The mayor can ask them to step down from the committee if they're not following certain procedures or if they're in violation. Now, if they reach a level of violation that is a violation of state statute, they can be taken to through the ethics process. But say they're on a committee and they've never shown up for their committee, and they haven't shown up for 9 months for their committee, and they didn't inform the chair why they're not there, and the chair says to the mayor, hey, I want somebody who's an active participant in my committee. How do we go about remedying that challenge? So do we specify that here, or do we leave it to the current process? Do we say, violations are up to the mayor's discretion? Violations that do not reach the level of an ethics violation are up to the mayor's discretion? I mean, how do we handle that is really the question. So any thoughts?
Well, I'd ask, does the mayor have the power to remove someone for cause? Or is the answer to that, well, it's complicated? If it's complicated, we should clarify it.
I would think it would depend on the committee structure. If it is a mayor's blue ribbon committee, then I would assume the mayor would have the right to remove essentially somewhat at will, based, with basis. I think a standing committee is a little, that's what I would think is a little bit more complex. Like a termed committee where the council has voted. Yeah.
I mean, considering, let's say, our current national politics, I would hate to have this kind of decision based on just politics. So I don't know how you keep from that, too. I mean,
Yeah, you don't want people to just be pushed off boards at political whim. So that's where I more think of like the mayor's blue ribbon committees, because those do change with election cycles.
Right.
We sometimes have blue ribbon committees for certain things, then they phase away. And so to me, those are more, like, transient is not the correct term that I'm looking for, but hopefully that
Yeah, well,
translates to whatever.
they're more like
Ad hoc committees, you know what I mean? Good example is the land use committee. You know what I mean? We had that. Prior before that, years ago with former Mayor Beckstead, there was the Blue Ribbon Committee for the selection of a new police commissioner when one had resigned. And so, yeah, those are more ad hoc and are more within term because they expire with that mayor's term versus the standing committees.
Okay. So then how do we address issues of, say you have someone who just hasn't attended any meetings?
Yeah, I think the
Well, I think
chair
that's
can
in the policy.
I can address that in
Yeah,
the
there's-
ordinance,
yeah, I
yeah.
was
The
gonna say.
city council shall declare vacant the office of any member who has unexcused absences for more than 1/3 of the regularly scheduled meeting of the board or commission in any calendar year. And I think then I think really maybe the question is, what's an excused absence, right? Is that sort of what the gray area might be? and maybe different chairs, and that comes through training of what, what is a,
I guess the way I think of unexcused absences are absences that are not
No call, no shows.
notified to the chair.
Or perhaps the chair doesn't excuse doesn't like the excuse.
Yeah.
right,
And that's
what I
where
was-
that's where it gets
the gray area.
Yeah, that's where you get blurry because it is a
Because your
volunteer.
dog needs a walk.
Yeah, but we do all have lives. I think about the EDC. It's an early morning Friday, and sometimes people have meetings or conferences, and you know what I mean. They hop in and they hop out, and it's. But I think you also think about that with the makeup of your committee. That it's very rare to have 100% attendance all the time.
Right. But say you have someone who's on your committee who decides to start splitting time
Yeah.
between here and Florida and doesn't show up on Zoom for your meetings, and chooses just not to for 6 months of the year. So then how do you handle, that? I guess, do we need clarification here that the mayor can bring these concerns back to the council?
I think that's an excellent question that's
Yeah.
been raised,
I would,
and that we should give some thought to and look into.
Yeah, because I would assume there would be discussion between the chair and the mayor first.
yeah,
that
I would
is- that
assume
is the-
that the chair has to have some input on that.
Yeah, I think it
Exactly.
needs. I think it definitely needs to be
I
led.
mean, if a person is valuable enough to that discussion of the committee, but, I don't know, let's say they get in a car accident
That's right.
and, are gone for
Right.
months.
It may be also to look at section 1.302 again, because I think that might even have language about like attendance reports coming back, if I'm remembering correctly. And maybe that's the place where we need to look at that holistically and, answer some of these questions and help define some of this gray area within the confines of that portion of chapter 1.
Right. Right. I think it's really critical that this is really a very clear process. If we're going to ask people to go through training to serve, then you have to say, what if I don't follow these rules? What does that look like? And some of them, it's really clear. If you've broken a law, I mean, there's a clear process. If you've violated the ethics code, there's a clear process. But then there are things that it's just kind of fuzzy. And we want to make sure that if we're asking them to do certain things, that it's really clear what a violation looks like. Is it a warning? Is it your name gets brought to the council for, an official warning? Is there, what is that process? So that people are aware when they're going into it, they know what the process is. I think that's all I would like to see. I don't like it when things are fuzzy and,
It may be that there are too many variations to delineate them all. It may be that it's something that you want to put in the hands of the chair of whatever committee. If there's a concern, that the chair then raise it with the mayor,
I think that's
as
a
we
good idea.
discussed.
Yeah, I like that.
Because there's no way we're ever going to be able to make a complete list. And it does, there is a reason to have a chair, so, and that's typically the powers of the chair, to monitor the conduct of the other members of the committee. So I do think that then that falls back to, okay, then what power does the mayor have to rescind his appointment? And that will depend upon what the committee is, how it's formed. So we'll look into all of those rules.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's a real question I have. What is the mayor's authority here, and does it need to come to the council? You know?
Yes, eventually, I would think so. If the council approves somebody, I would think it's going to have to go to the council, but.
Okay. So if we can, I guess at our next meeting, come back with kind of some options, and where if we need to go back to the ordinance in 1302 to clarify that, because 1302 is not terribly clear. It talks about us keeping attendance, and I'm not sure all of our committee chairs actually do keep attendance, so maybe.
Well, it's in the
that-
minutes. I mean,
It
if
is
you
in the
have
minutes, it is in
yeah.
the minutes, but we should make sure that that's really clear how that's done, because I'm not sure everyone keeps a chart necessarily of who attends and when they attend, but, I mean, it can become obvious
You
over
can go
time,
through the minutes and just,
and look through it and determine, yes.
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't keep a chart.
No, I don't keep a chart, by the way, of when everyone's here or not.
But it is,
have a
it's always
record keeper.
listed in the minutes.
It's listed in the minutes, and I think that that's one of those, there is discretion in the chair role, like and that's important to note, but there should also be some process if the problem is with the chair.
Well, that's true.
So you might have a chair that might not be able to attend, and I think we've encountered this a few times in the
Yeah.
I
city.
think we have.
Sort of like the ethics, the way that's, if the complaint comes against city attorneys, that's city, there's sort of
Step by
a
step.
switch, whereas the process can continue, but yet with different players, yeah.
Yeah.
So at our next meeting, if everyone's up for, we'll kind of discuss how we can address this, just to clarify it, make it a little more clear for everyone. If everyone's up for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to Vince's point, there's passions on either side of how much the city should grow. There's passions on how much of either side the city's government should spend. And you don't want to have minority viewpoints in a committee pushed out because of disagreements over policy. So there's got to be a very clear test for, like, somebody doesn't show up for half the meetings or more. There's got to be very clear criteria so that it doesn't be political.
That's right.
I would think that I'll call it a complaint against someone, should originate from the chair to the mayor.
I think what's hard about that is that you're pigeonholing that somebody has to go to their chair. Versus there may not be a level of comfort with the chair, or we're not considering interpersonal relationships that happen in our community outside of City Hall. Where somebody, we could all be on a committee and Kate could be the chair, and somebody, if there's a resident or somebody else, could maybe not want to go to Kate because I'm a fellow city councilor. And so they only feel comfortable either going to legal or the mayor. So that's where my only concern is, where I think if there is how do I word this? A violation of the ordinance, that should come from the chair, right? If there's a violation of either an ethics, an attendance, anything that's written in our ordinance, that should come from the chair, but individual committee members do have the right to either go to legal or the mayor.
I think that that's a really critical point, because I'm thinking about the non-discrimination and anti-harassment policy.
Yeah.
I can see someone not feeling comfortable talking
Yeah.
to the chair, especially if maybe it's coming from the chair. Like, how do you approach harassment in a setting like that, and making sure that
Well,
there's
that-
freedom to report elsewhere?
So that language could be used, or similar language could be used in this.
Yeah.
We can look to the ethics ordinance to see
Yeah.
that structure and
Yeah.
make sure that wouldn't be identical, but to address sort of that.
Yeah, can we put in a broad statement that says, like, just violation of any city ordinance or policy gets directed to blah, 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 and then I don't know, forget that part, never mind. I just,
Put specifics in. These
Yeah.
violations would be referred this way.
yes.
It's different methods, different processes for different
That might be pretty
complaints.
complex.
Well, I guess that's why I was kind of thinking sweeping. Like, if it says, if a violation of, the city's ethics policy goes here. So you're not like outlining individual actions, but more the things we already have. So it, like, in reference to.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So we're not rewriting if you do this, if you do that.
We definitely don't want to rewrite the way that those policies are, or those ordinances are already written, but there might be value in saying, if there is a violation, that you go to your chair first. If you're uncomfortable going to your chair, your remedy is to go to the legal
mayor.
department or directly to the mayor, something like that. Creating an alternative process where if people are uncomfortable, I can see the value in that. And so we should just think about what that ultimately looks like, right? And to make sure that we're not, that there are enough checks in that process that you're not going to end up with a political issue or political challenge. I would not envision someone filing a complaint and someone being removed, that month because of lack of attendance or because of, that's not the vision. The only way I can see that happening is if you did commit a serious violation of the law or the ethics code, or, and you always have to leave room for, if you're not governed by state statute. A lot of these roles are not governed by state statute. I'm thinking like, say, the Arts and Cultural Commission. And you have someone commit a serious violation, there is nothing that would keep the mayor from saying, I think you should probably resign, and giving them that ability to do so. Whereas you can't do that, you can't follow that same, we have a different process when it comes to state mandated and state governed individuals.
Well, often that remedy is to go to Superior Court.
Exactly. So we have to think about the distinctions there too.
Well, I think you need to be careful too, delicate balance, because you don't want to discourage people from volunteering, right? You don't want to scare them away.
That's right. That's why I want the process to be clear, because I want everybody to know exactly what their rights are, not just what their responsibilities are, but what their rights are in their roles. Because you want people to feel comfortable speaking their minds too in the committees. I think that that's important.
Yeah, I mean, it seems you'd have clear black and white situations like lack of attendance, self-enrichment, ethics violations, violations of state law. And then you've got gray areas. And gray area to me is always when a committee deliberates and then somebody tries to subvert the decisions of the committee. That needs an investigation. But that's a gray one. And then there's healthy dissent in a committee, and you don't want to stifle that. That's not black and white. That's just white. So, you'd have to establish the black and white violations. But I don't think that.
Which is pretty much outlined in the ethics.
Yes, there's clear ethics, and that our Chapter 1, our ordinance on attendance is clear, but it's narrow. The definition of what consists of a ethics violation isn't as broad as what people have been discussing, and the devil is in the detail for the gray area. Balancing what the city attorney said about encouraging volunteers. But hopefully, information is power, right? That people, at least if there's some clear processes baked in place that people know in advance, then hopefully it won't be discouraging, but it will be helpful to them to know what's expected of them.
Exactly. Yes, I don't, it's difficult because you think about the anti-harassment policy, and I think that that's the one I'm going to keep coming back to in my mind. It may not be an ethics violation, but it's definitely a violation of our city policy if you're harassing someone in your committee, and it may not rise to the level of a criminal offense. using inappropriate language with someone, or,
Well,
but
it
it's,
exposes the city to civil liability,
exactly,
a hostile work environment or, anything like that.
exactly. So we have to have a procedure that's really clear for someone who's committing one of those violations that maybe doesn't rise to that, or we couldn't charge, go through that ethics process for someone like that. So how do we handle it is my concern. So,
And then you've got the gray area between defined harassment and just bad behavior, right?
Yes.
So, again, it's when things are,
You may not be able to
defined. all of it.
discipline bad behavior. You might just have goals of good behavior.
that's right. But maybe
And then,
there's,
discipline things that are very concrete.
Yeah, or maybe a letter, if there's that referral, then there's a letter that's drafted, or the step 2 may be something else, step 3 may be removal.
right, or maybe you're not reappointed. There's a history of, there's a process where, letters are put on file regarding your, some things that you've done, so that the next time your appointment comes up, those are reviewed.
Chair, one minute. I apologize. I have to exit. I have to go meet with the city manager.
That's okay.
12:15. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We still have quorum, so we will stay and discuss, I think, the next thing. Is there any more comments or concerns here on getting this back with additional recommendations?
I just had a couple of niggly things. In our description of all of our summary of motions,
Yes.
sort of Robert's rules.
Oh, yes, that needs to be updated.
Right. Yeah, that was sent me running to the bookcase for Robert's rules, but
Yes.
I haven't even looked at it.
Yes, this was a borrowed copy, so,
yeah, motion to reconsider. We need to clarify that that
yes.
has to be from somebody in the majority. It has to be within the same meeting or giving notice that it's going to be at the next meeting, as opposed to motion to rescind.
Yes.
Oh,
Where did this chart come from? The origin of this?
It came from the city that originally drafted the manual
Oh,
we
okay.
borrowed from. So,
I have a number of cheat sheets that we
Yeah.
can
We can
look at.
input
Yeah.
yes, it can be substituted for in whole or
Sure.
part. I thought it was helpful to include in the manual for those who don't know Robert's rules, to have something.
And lastly, on our paragraph about social media, are we going to refer to a more complete policy somewhere? Because I thought it was important to say, if when voicing an opinion on social media that differs from the board or commission, somebody needs to say that it's their personal opinion. Because I read about all these towns and they have giant food fights on social media, and nobody is saying, this is just my opinion,
Yeah.
not the,
I'm not speaking for the entire
Yeah, not on
committee
behalf of the committee.
or the city or,
right.
Is that language you think that we could include here? Rather than, because I don't think that there's not a separate policy that we're referring to.
We could include it here, yeah.
And
We could add it
include-
into this.
Okay. I think that's a good point to clarify, actually.
Yeah.
And not reflective of the committee.
Right. This is the challenge when you're dealing with elected officials and you're talking online. Everybody understands that it's this elected officials.
And then you
Opinion.
get into free speech.
Right.
Right, and
Yeah.
that's the point. And private comments versus comments touching the city. Anything that comes through our servers and through our phones obviously is different than private to private. And we can't necessarily control that, but we can, give guidance on this. And reminders that you should say, this is not the view of the committee if you're on your private social media account.
Right.
Because it can appear to be conflict or, all other types of issues.
And we seem to handle this fairly well, at least most of our members at public comment when they come up, and they'll say, I'm on this committee, but I'm here representing myself.
Yes, and we have guidance saying they
Right, you
need
do
to do
have the
that.
guidance to do that.
Right, exactly. So then it makes sense to also include the same guidance here. We can't control what they say on social media, but we can provide some,
Guidance and
Guidance.
common sense and, some
Right.
some helpful guidance, hopefully.
I hope so. I think that the value here is for people to understand that this type of speech, like any speech, is subject to, issues around legal challenges for the
That's always
city.
challenged, though. That is constantly challenged on
I know.
social media, so,
Right.
can we say that?
Right. If you,
Those are big challenges.
that's the thing. And if you are saying stuff on social media, you have to understand that it is subject to review if anything you're discussing ends up in a
Well,
legal challenge.
that's what's being challenged in courts right now. I mean, it's, I don't know. I just don't post on social media.
It's a safe.
Common sense guide to.
Are there any other questions too before we move on from
No.
the manual? Okay. All right, we're comfortable with that. The next item is some of these background policies, I think. And I'm going to turn it back over to Attorney Farini.
Yes, what I did is I just included the existing city policies that are referenced, and it's not a perfect fit, obviously, because these were drafted for employees, but a lot of the points, particularly in the standard of conduct and code of ethics, you've seen these before. These are the ones that we've referred to in the volunteer policy, as well as the non-discrimination and harassment policy and the acceptable use policy. But interestingly, that kind of links to the handout, the next document that we tried to put together. And I'm not sure if we want to review this for this meeting or wait for the next meeting and take a look at this draft of what I've entitled Board, Commission, and Committee Volunteer Member Training Policy. It links back to the volunteer handbook, so we're not reinventing the wheel. But we could modify some of these existing staff policies to be tailored to volunteers if that's the will of the committee. All I did in this was refer to the volunteer handbook and the policies therein, and then just try to give an outline based upon what that training might include. I think originally this document had this plus that attempted to modify sort of the code of conduct for staff. So if it's the will of the committee to create a specific policy to be baked in, to this, that's fine. But again, for shorthand and linking and getting people not too afraid to join boards, I thought it was good to try to get down what the training might be for the board's review.
This makes sense to everyone. This is what we've been reviewing. We started with the training policy, and then we were going to do a code of conduct policy. We decided to combine the two, and now those are kind of combined, but what happened was we moved all the policies into the training manual.
Right, so this would then be linked to the training manual. So if this got approved, then this too would be on that page of policies, and then it would be, again, it's hard to structure, but I think that would work.
Does that make sense to everyone, the way that this is structured now? Or do we want to go back to being very specific about the policies listed in this policy, this general policy for training?
There's a certain amount of flexibility you need in training. It's going to change more dynamically than with a document like this. Things will come up that you need to train for that weren't there before. But a minimum list of what the training would be.
So I think,
Makes sense.
I mean, that's just the A, Bs, and Cs at the end of this. And again, I did add at number 8, the consequences of board members' failure to comply. So again, depending upon the report back on sort of more clear guidance on that, that would be part of the training as well, once that's finalized.
I know, I feel that this captures what we were trying to do, and it still lists all of those things that are then in the training manual where you have to go through, you're going to have to go through the modules, basically the training manual when you do your training. So you will review them all. And then it adds those other key things that we need to make sure everyone understands, like the role of the chair and, how you interact with the chair or anyone else. And that's all then clarified in the training manual, what all of those things are through the training process. So I like this new version. I feel like it captures a lot more of what we've discussed. Is this something that we want to go through and review between now and the next meeting?
I
Make
would,
sure
yeah.
we don't have any other questions?
Yeah. Let's bring back our thoughts next time.
Okay. And that'll give the assistant mayor also an opportunity to come back with thoughts on this, because I think this is exactly what we discussed the last time, putting these things together, and really kind of brings that together. How does everyone feel about the staff policies? I know, I looked through them. I think it's clear to me that the code of conduct, that we probably need to modify the code of conduct to fit volunteers versus staff slightly, because there are things here that clearly won't apply to volunteers, like political activities. Some volunteers
Yeah.
won't be subject to
It's
that.
okay
and
for them.
Yeah, we're not going to police what they're wearing or buttons that they're wearing at committee meeting, that kind of thing. Some of these things just don't apply, but a lot of the things do.
So would you like me to come back with edits to the volunteer manual and an edit to the code of conduct for consideration and post it to the agenda, and that way that can be considered along with this policy for the next meeting?
I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
What does the rest of the committee think?
I don't think it would be that hard to edit. In fact, I think it was started. I just cut it off. Yeah, I think Susan started it, but then because we were doing the linking and we had this, I figured I'd do this now, and
Okay.
then I think it's already been reviewed.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense if we do that. There's also a section under the anti-harassment too, just so
Yeah.
you know, about reporting procedures.
Right, that are hard. And I think I said at least I think I said that please replace, employee with member and
Exactly.
supervisor with chair, so that the reporting could work. But I can take a look at that too and try to make a better edit. And it could either be referenced in the volunteer handbook or
Right,
bring the policies back attached to that handbook as edited.
okay. Yeah, that's the only thing I had a question about. I saw that recommendation, but the reporting procedures specifically refer to the Director of Human Resources and the City Manager, and we don't want our volunteers going to Human Resources or the City Manager.
No.
So we want to make sure that it's clear what their reporting channel is.
Say legal, probably.
Yeah, legal, the chair, legal.
Yeah.
So,
Or the mayor, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
the
mayor
mayor.
should have an open door policy on that for
Yeah.
complaints.
yes, I agree. So that gives us I guess, just a little more clarity there. And then, yeah, that makes sense to everyone. Does anyone else have anything that they want to request before next meeting?
When is the next meeting? Is it 28?
Let me double check. I believe,
Halloween week.
oh, of course, yes, it is the 28th.
Okay.
So in 2 weeks, on the 28th, is our next meeting.
Is that enough for you guys?
Enough time? Okay,
Yes.
okay.
You have nothing else to do?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying yes.
I seem to remember that then there's, you know, a little more than 2 weeks, we have that a holiday in November, and I'm still leaving that last meeting in November, the 25th of November, as a possible dropping it, because that's Thanksgiving week. So I think maybe we should meet on the 28th so that we can have that one meeting in November and not two, potentially. I think that would be preferable for everyone.
We will do our best to get a lot done.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds great.
I don't see any November ones except for.
Yes, November, it's on a Tuesday. I think then that's the challenge.
yeah,
It's
the 12th,
The
yeah.
12th, and I'd like to drop the 25th so that people aren't thinking Thanksgiving week that they're coming in. So, so if we can work towards that goal.
That would be nice.
If there's nothing else on this, I think we'll go to public comment. I don't think there's anyone here. Is there anyone on Zoom for public comment?
No, I don't think anybody joined on Zoom.
Okay.
Usually it appears.
You might have to go to your other tab.
Yeah.
Here,
No, oh,
this guy?
that-
This one,
that
sorry,
one,
excuse
yeah.
me.
Oops.
No, that's not it.
Oh, I think at the bottom, if you click on the bottom at Zoom, there's like a little, at the very bottom of your browser, there's a little thing for Zoom.
Oh, I see it, yep.
Um,
Just a second. Oh, it's not even
Okay,
workplace Zoom. No.
okay. Well, I don't think we have anyone on Zoom then. No,
No.
just us? Okay, so then there's no public comment. Then I think the next thing would be a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned.